Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. We are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hey there, all you porcupines. This is your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the Free State Project, Eric Brakey, coming to you for another brand new episode of the Porcupine Report. This is episode 46. Now, first of all, I want to apologize to our loyal audience that last week, for the very first time, we didn't bring you a new episode. We had a guest. There were some technical issues. You know what? I think that's been 45 episodes, 45 weeks in a row. We've brought you a new episode every single week. The last week was the first time we missed, but we did a replay of a great episode, an interview I did all the way back on episode 3 with Jason Sorens, the founder of the Free State Project, talking about a lot of the history of the Free State Project from its inception to where it has come to today. I thought that would be a great one for people to check out in case the audience for the show has grown quite a bit over 45 episodes. And so I figured some of you may have missed episode 3, but that was a very good one. So I hope you enjoyed it last week. But this week, of course, we do have a new episode with a great guest we'll be getting to in a moment. First, I want to give you an update on some matters with the Free State Project. Of course, it is the Christmas season in New Hampshire, beautiful time of year. New Hampshire, you may have seen, or maybe not. If not, I'll tell you, it was just ranked number 1 in America, not just for freedom. Of course, we're always getting ranked number 1 for freedom. I mean, that's expected at this point. We just got ranked number 1 for Christmas cheer, believe it or not. So this is the most Christmassy state in all of America, right here in New Hampshire. I will say I do know a number of folks who do have Christmas tree farms. I think that probably has something to do with it. Of course, you do get the best evergreen Christmas trees from right here in New England. So it makes a bit of sense why we'd be ranked number 1 for Christmas cheer. I will say, as I've mentioned on a couple episodes leading up to this, that we are in fundraising season for, I'm sure all your favorite nonprofits are in fundraising season as we head towards the end of the year. The Free State Project is a tax-deductible nonprofit. Your contributions to support our efforts to identify and recruit and new movers to build community and to engage people in the process of building a free society. Your contributions right now are greatly appreciated. They are tax-deductible. And of course, for the limited time being, we have a generous donor who's put up $90,000 in matching funds. That means for every dollar we raise between now and the end of the year, it will be matched dollar for dollar. You get to double your impact. So you can sign up at fsp.org/give. And we actually just launched right now what we're calling our Porcupine Patron Program with a lot of really nice benefits, little thank you gifts to say thank you to those who are contributing to make the work at the Free State Project possible. One of those things, if you're watching the video version of the show, you might notice I have this really nice little golden porcupine. We're calling this our Porcupine Patron Pin, exclusively for those who contribute at least $100 a year or $10 a month to the Free State Project. And there's a lot of other nice little goodies that scale up from there. We're not talking about we're not talking about you getting some tote bag like you might get from, I don't know, NPR or something. We're talking about really great, nice little thank you gifts, starting with a nice lapel pin, but we're talking about complimentary tickets to Free State Project events. We're talking about signed books by Free State authors, and also access to a physical print newsletter. Yes, we are launching a physical print newsletter exclusively for patrons. If you sign up, it'll be mailed to your home once every 3 months in the new year. So sign up, support the Free State Project, get a nice tax deduction if that's something you care about. But ultimately support the good work, support the mission of building a free society in the Free State, live free or die, New Hampshire. All right, let's get into welcoming our guest for today's episode. Well, I did mention we're going to be, for our patrons, we have books that we're going to be making available, signed books from Free State authors. And our guest today is actually one of those Free State authors. He's someone who's been involved on the periphery. It took a long time to make the move, but he's been involved with the Free State Project for much of the last 20 years. He's seen a lot. He's experienced a lot. He has his own professional accomplishments we'll be talking about. He gave a great talk at the Porcupine Freedom Festival this past year on growing New Hampshire liberty with AI. And he just this past year, he released a new book called Growing Liberty, Nurturing Personal and Economic Freedom in an Unfree World, which includes great profiles of different individuals who have made their mark on the Free State movement over the years, and the kind of lessons we can learn from the models that they have set. So our guest today is Matt Barney. Let's welcome him to the show.
Good to be with you.
Well, Matt, glad to have you with us. And, I remember it was at Porcupine Day, which will be coming up again this February, our annual anniversary of the day that the move was triggered, when we reached 20,000 pledges. And the founder of the Free State Project, Jason Sorens, was reading to folks at this event the introduction that he had written to your book, kind of documenting some of the history over the years of the Free State Project. But I didn't get to meet you personally. I kind of known you as a name. I'd seen a few emails from you. I didn't get to meet you personally until you finally made the move yourself. And I enjoyed coming to your welcome wagon up in the North Country to help myself and a bunch of other Free Staters help you unload your U-Haul and move into your new home. So let me ask you, as someone who's been a long time slow porcupine, in terms of making the move, how does it feel to finally be here?
It feels great. And it's, honestly better than expected. And you and all the 17 people that came with you to help me move in was actually pivotal for me here in Gorham, with my local neighbors who are like flabbergasted that so many people who moved, that I didn't even know, mostly helped me move in such a short order, to a level that underneath me, the people are asking, what is the Free State Project? And I said, we're here for live free or die culture. And then some remember Governor Benson back in the early days when New Hampshire wasn't selected as the state. And I reminded them that he encouraged us to move here. And they were fine with that. So many pleasant surprises finally moving here with people that aren't technically part of the Free State Project, but are more or less pro-freedom.
Yeah, and of course and I'm sure is maybe better than most, having been involved in so much of the history over the years, that of course New Hampshire was chosen not to like, hey, here's some state that we're going to come and we're going to change. It's like, here's a state with a pre-existing libertarian cultural ethic that we want to participate in, and I find that the only folks who tend to be upset that we're moving here are the progressives who actually want to change the state, and we've been maybe a monkey wrench in their machinations to turn the state progressive.
Well, the pro-freedom people, locals here, have encouraged me to tell people that I'm here for freedom, because they're upset that when I told them I'm originally from Wisconsin, but I told them I moved here from California, they said, don't tell anybody that. We don't want those anti-freedom people moving in here.
Yeah.
These are native.
Yeah. Well, and that, of course, this is one of the details that's often missed. People see, I heard this when I was down in Texas too, right? People were concerned about all the folks leaving California and coming to Texas. But of course, you actually, pop the engine and you look at like the numbers and like who's actually moving. And by and large, it's the conservatives and right of center folks who were fleeing California because of how bad things had gotten. And sure, there's some Democrats or kind of left-wing folks who, but by and large, in terms of the overall numbers, and of course, the Free State movement is that on steroids, right? Like we are personally selecting for people from all around the country, particularly in the states where freedom is just an unobtainable idea to come and build it here. So um, let me ask you, what was your first taste of the Free State Project?
I first learned about it from Jason's essay, and I heard the online buzz and a bunch of the old forums back then, right after I wasn't one of the people creating the Free State Project, but there was already a website. There used to be an online forum. And so that got me quite interested. I decided to sign the statement of intent, and I kept track of it, planning on being here as many vacations as I could, working and living around the world. It was not always easy to get here, but honestly, my time thinking about moving here and knowing I couldn't for a bunch of personal reasons until now was part of why I wrote that book, Growing Liberty, that you showed at the beginning. Because seeing the pattern, so many people moved and most stayed, but not everyone. And part of my motive for writing that book was thinking about my history of seeing people come and go. And why is it that not everybody stayed? It's largely not because they didn't want to. They had some either family or a lot of times economic reasons. And I think a lot of it was because a lot of them didn't know about my field. Most liberty types know quite a bit about economics, quite a lot about philosophy, maybe political science. They know nothing about psychology, which is my field. And so that the patterns I saw in the Free State Project were part of my motive for writing a book that would not only recruit more people to move here, but keep them here.
Now, before we get into some of the more details of the book, I want to ask, how did you, I guess, become a libertarian in the first place? So you were a libertarian preceding the creation of the Free State Project. I
Yes.
can't say the same. I was still in high school listening to George W. Bush propaganda. But how did you kind of find the liberty movement? What was your in to this?
I didn't have the words for liberty, but I had inclinations. I used to tell people, even at a young age, that I'm more liberal on personal stuff than the left seems to be, and more conservative than the right seems to be on economic things. As I was fascinated with economics. In fact, I started college thinking I wanted to be an economist. I'd read that stuff, but I didn't have the words of liberty and really a well-formulated worldview and my identity in it until I read a book called Libertarianism in One Lesson when I was in grad school, my first year of grad school. And that's when it kind of solidified for me that's kind of who I was. And much later, there's actually a psychologist who's very fair to us. Jonathan Haidt is more well-known for anti-woke stuff, but his original work basically says a lot of us we're built this way. Even if we don't have the words for liberty and we don't know the philosophy of liberty or ethics or economics, our orientation, our personality orientation is geared this way, and we're distinct from the people on the authoritarian left or authoritarian right. So maybe, like many others watching this, they had some inclination about these things, at least intuitively, even if they didn't have the words. And it was later when those words formulated and those frameworks kind of materialized. For me, it was really grad school when I said, okay, I must be a libertarian.
That's fascinating, because I know that we often run into this challenge of the education model, which certainly people do change their minds, and people do go from one day they were a neoconservative to the next day they've kind of had an epiphany and they become a libertarian, or a left-wing progressive. There are these moments where people have epiphanies and they change their mind. But there's also oftentimes you think it would be easier to convince someone with, I think, the common sense of the liberty arguments, and sometimes the education model just doesn't work. Which, of course, is what makes the Free State Project so interesting, is that it doesn't rely on trying to persuade all the people around us. It's just, let's gather up the people who are already libertarian and live in one place.
That's right.
From kind of your psychological perspective, should we give up hope on the education model, or where does the
Not
education
completely.
model fit into?
No. So, and a lot of my work is focused on development and the science of it and scaling it. So no, I don't think there's complete lack of hope for it. In fact, in fairness, even ironically, before I really understood liberty, and I'm not really in favor of state-funded universities. My undergraduate was at University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is the Berkeley of the Midwest. And literally, I was an econ major for the first couple of years. So I learned a lot about free markets. It wasn't so Austrian school, it was more Chicago school and a little bit of Keynesian, but I knew about it. But honestly, the pure ethics side was another philosophy professor at Madison, which convinced me, business ethics, things like that. He was very much a libertarian, even though he's working for the state. So I don't think it's completely hopeless. It's just extremely difficult for a bunch of reasons from social psychology. When we made commitments and we've publicly espoused maybe a statist or authoritarian worldview in a public way, we feel pressure within ourselves, and other people don't say nice things about us if we radically deviate from it. So you could see where in the free state, raising your children with pro-freedom values is a way better model than doing your best to do it in spite of all the authoritarianism outside of them. So I don't think education's completely pointless. It's just way harder if you're not physically here with a bunch of freedom for freedom types and homeschoolers where the environment around them is every bit as pro-freedom as the instruction you're giving them from the Ron Paul curriculum, for example.
That's a good way of thinking about it, I suppose. It's easier to educate the ideas of freedom in a culture of freedom.
Yes.
And find receptive minds for it. Well, let's hop into your book. I know as I flip through it, and you have a lot of profiles of individuals who I've come to know during my year now as a participant with the Free State Project. I see a profile on Joel Valenzuela, who was our second guest on the Porcupine Report. Who's a bankless cryptocurrency pioneer. You have a whole kind of section on him. You have Ian Freeman, who we just did an episode on his unjust incarceration and prosecution by the federal government for cryptocurrency. Boy, I'm just flipping through here. Who else do I see? A lot of interesting folks. What could you tell us about? Why did you decide to kind of write the book in this fashion of some of the profiles of particular individuals or particular, I guess, templates of how you might exist here in the Free State Project? And could you, I guess, tell us a little bit of some of those you chose to focus on?
Happy to. My original goal with the book, and all the proceeds are donated to the Free State Project, was both to attract and keep people in the Free State Project. But I wanted to do it with things that would be largely unknown to liberty lovers of all stripes, the psychology side of it. So I kind of pitched to Jason. I sent Jason a bunch of persuasion books at the beginning of the Free State Project, hoping his message would be powerful. And he's told me that even back in his Dartmouth days and before he even moved to New Hampshire, he'd been using these things for a while. So I ran this kind of the basic idea about developing yourself for more freedom, changing the situation around you with ultimately moving here is the ultimate. He liked it. And I said, love for you and Carla to play a role. I asked, it was really Carla gets the credit for the idea of the interviews. I wasn't thinking so concretely the way Carla was, but I think it's powerful because it makes it real of how real porcupines are actually doing some of the things I talk about that the science says we should to grow more freedom, either within yourself or around you. And I also was hoping, not knowing the Porcupine Report would be around, but I was hoping there'd be videos like this where people could be interviewed to talk about their role in promoting freedom in New Hampshire. And it would give them another jumping off point, whether it's inside New Hampshire or in some other venue. That was one of my hopes. But it was also good. Obviously, I wasn't living here yet when I was writing the book and interviewing it. So it was nice to finally, to connect with some of these people and then meet them in real life once I got here. So the examples you gave were just highlighting for me things that were representative of really effective use of some of the things psychology would recommend you do. If you're not sure what you love to do and you're kind of polymath, how would you hone in on it, especially to make a living? Because I was frustrated, Eric, that there's a bunch of porcupines who moved here and left because they couldn't make ends meet or they couldn't figure out how to make their business work here. And I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I knew something about that. I was hoping some of these lessons would do that, especially with serial entrepreneurs that are in the book, or people like Joel, who, in spite of extreme hardships, lives bankless. That's pretty impressive. And we have perhaps, I think, the oldest Bitcoin meetup group is in Manchester. We have some of the earliest. If you ask Bitcoin Jesus, Roger Ver, who's famously been jailed by the feds right now, he learned about Bitcoin from Ian and Mark's Free Talk Live out of Keene. So we have a very central role in the history of crypto in the world, really. And before the blockchain wars in 2017, New Hampshire was really center of the universe for people living bankless on crypto. I'm not sure that that's true anymore, but we still have tremendous power because of people like Keith Amon and his work with the decentralized autonomous organizations, which are largely run on blockchains. So I wanted to highlight people like this. Keith is not in my book, but people like this that are moving the needle on liberty. And frankly, it's helped because now some of the people thinking about moving have read the book and they ask me about some of these people. Stephen Nash, who I just saw in the weekend with a celebration of the volunteers about his free food network. He has quite a constructive way of building relationships with pro-freedom farm community people that aren't necessarily free staters, but it's a less incendiary approach than some of the old school Keeniac type of activism, which sometimes had backlash with locals. Stephen Nash is also from Wisconsin. He's got a prime role in showing how he's been able to influence more liberty. So what I wanted to do, it's really, Carla was the inspiration for those concrete examples. And, I'm glad she pushed me on it because it wasn't my knee-jerk reaction, but I think it makes for a better book. And hopefully it makes it more compelling to not only buy, but to ultimately move and internalize the lessons I tried to teach in the book chapters.
Well, that's great. There certainly are, I think, 20 years of kind of lessons and examples to be learned. And I know this is one of the questions I know with our kind of core team here at the Free State Project, we've been asking a lot lately, is kind of looking at the examples of the folks who did come and they planted roots and they've kind of really found tremendous success here. There, of course, are the same stories as you reference of people who did come and didn't quite find their place, didn't quite kind of plant roots and get settled, and ended up drifting away and heading somewhere else, or maybe they're still here and they've just kind of faded. They're just not involved. So I certainly think kind of having these models of success stories to look at is a great jumping off point for asking ourselves, like, what can we do to better support people, and especially that first year when people make the move and they're trying to plant roots and get connected and find their community, and as well as all the practical concerns, right, of housing and employment and the things you need for life.
Well, I've had nothing but excellent support, not just the 17 of you, including you, Eric, that moved me in, but just endless. The social calendar has been fantastic. So many nice people, so many events to go to, weddings, so many things to do, new friends. So I've definitely felt the social side of it. And I because of that new mover tradition being 2 decades long, I think that's always been true. And because there's more community here than any other liberty spot on planet Earth, that's all true. I think the part that's maybe trickier for some porcupines is the financial part, getting a job. Now, there are, of course, FSP people, including me, trying to help promote people. I was pleasantly surprised, didn't expect it, but my co-founder and chief technology officer is a porcupine himself, Dr. Dan Burfoot in Portsmouth. I only met him a few months ago after moving here because he found out about me and my work. So like that's synergistic, and I didn't expect it, but hey, that's fantastic. How do we also help others that are entrepreneurial or maybe wanting a career but growing those skills? And that's kind of my area of focus professionally, and that's what I tried to put pieces of into the book to keep people here on an economic foot if that was one of the reasons people were leaving in the past.
I've certainly noticed that there is a disproportionate number of, I guess we could call them digital nomads, of folks who often work in like tech sectors where they can work from anywhere as long as they have access to an internet connection. And of course, you find a lot of libertarians in that field. You also find a lot of is, Silicon Valley, San Francisco kind of progressives, but you also find a lot of libertarians there. And so it has been interesting to see as I've gotten to know so many people who are kind of in that category. But we have such human resources here for I want to do more to pitch people with capital to come and invest and start businesses that, like, if you want to do something in the liberty sphere or work with liberty people, it's like, this is where the human resources are. We've got tons of people who can do great work, and there's some more synergy there. But there's always kind of more folks to recruit.
Well, and I think to that point, Eric, one of my goals of the book was, what the hell is Mises Institute doing in the South? Like, can we reframe Cato to be more pro-liberty than a kind of the DC side? How do we get organizations to come here too? I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. I think about people at work and organizations. We've got Josiah Bartlett Center. That's a native one. But why shouldn't we should be a net importer also of what it doesn't have to be 501c3s. It can be for-profit, but Liberty Central should be here. Freedom Fest and Anarchapulco are better suited here. Yes, we're not a tropical environment, but this is where liberty lives. And so can we recruit the organizations, the venture capital, and frankly, I think the philanthropic pro-freedom venture philanthropy type stuff. It just belongs here, especially with our DAO structure and our blockchain expertise and DeFi. There's plenty of opportunities to think creatively about living more free in a way that doesn't require that centralized command and control, but you've got the talent and you got the right value system here to channel freedom in a good way, whether it's for profit or for moving the needle on liberty in New Hampshire.
Well, I know every time I see the folks who run my former employer, Young Americans for Liberty, I'm always putting a bug in their ears about when are they going to open a regional office in New Hampshire. It's nice being down in Texas, I suppose, but this is like one of their top like Liberty Lighthouse states where they've got over 100 Liberty legislators elected. Like, be good for them to have a presence here. But also, of course, for all these other organizations, I think you're right. Respect to organizations like Cato and Reason and some of these groups that are kind of more established, kind of on the in the DC kind of beltway. That's kind of, I guess, they want to be in close proximity to the goings on in the nation's capital. But of course, I think we should all know by this point in time that the real progress, the real, at least politically, progress for liberty, if you don't just want to be disappointed all the time, is happening in the state capitals. And New Hampshire, of course, is far and away the leader on that. And so it'd be good to have a presence here. We'll have some outreach we got to do. Of course, I do appreciate, you do have some groups here, and I know Americans for Prosperity seems to always be hiring kind of good people who want to do kind of political activism for liberty. That's great to have. But some of those big organizations, if you're watching from one of those big organizations, you need to start asking your employers, like, does a regional office in New Hampshire make sense? Look at all the talent that's there.
Well, and I think look at where we're headed. I mean, tremendous success in this most recent state election. We're going to accelerate liberty. It's going to be embarrassing for these organizations not to have a presence here eventually. Do they want to get ahead of the needle? It's going to be like that. We're going to continue to expand our lead because so many movers. It'll be embarrassing. They can either be proactive and be leaders in liberty with us, or be embarrassed into joining us later. Their choice. Their choice.
Matt, so in your professional life, I've got you down. You're an industrial organizational psychologist.
That's right.
Could you explain a little bit what that means? And then also, I'd love to talk more about the talk you gave at PorcFest, which people can find that talk on our new Spotify podcast channel, which is called PorcFest Talks. So anyone can go and check out your talk there. But you gave a talk on growing New Hampshire liberty with AI. So how does being an industrial organizational psychologist flow into your work with AI, and how do you apply those lessons to AI with opportunities to grow liberty in New Hampshire.
Yeah, they don't seem to go together, do they? It's sort of weird that I'm a strange combination. Well, my field studies people at work. It's the decision science for human resources, basically. So how do you hire people in a scientific way? How do you teach and coach them? How do you create a great work environment, make them so they wish to stick around and give their best work? And how do you affect teams and make them more effective, which is what my dissertation was about. And even the structure and culture and climate of the organization. With a lot of my books are around leadership. So you can see where the FSP itself could benefit from this kind of science of you hire. It's a small organization, but you hire and you grow, and you definitely want to be persuasive, just like New Hampshire Liberty Alliance wants to be persuasive. And so I have worked for many years with the world's expert, the most cited living expert in the area. He's a social psychologist named Dr. Robert Cialdini, and he's uncovered the 7 universal principles of ethical influence. 3 of them are about cultivating relationships, 2 are about reducing uncertainty, and 2 are about motivating action. You can see, as a former politician yourself, plenty of power in these things, tiny things that make a big difference. Well, the tricky part about it, and why AI, why did I talk about that at PorcFest, is these things are deceptively simple and they're very tricky to get right, even for people that are experts. And yet, before you go do testimony to a judge, or before you go give a pitch to prospective people that might want to vote for you, or before here on the Porcupine Report, we recruit people to move to New Hampshire, how do we honestly, in a totally ethical way, elevate to the surface, or maybe practice like a flight simulator before we do it in real life? So at PorcFest, I talked about my newest AI is I've in many inventions solving human resource problems in companies, mostly worked in multinationals. This is my second startup in AI. This one is very explainable and it's trustworthy, but you can basically measure whatever you're saying just from your text, just from your transcript, with extreme precision, more precision than what your doctor has to pass for a credentialing test, painlessly. And you can get it better, and it can coach you in how you might be more persuasive before you go talk to the board, talk to a customer, ask somebody for their vote. So you can get it right. And so at PorcFest, I thought, okay, it's a natural at a Porcupine Freedom Festival. Everybody's there for freedom. We'd like to influence more freedom. Some of us want to convince people to move to New Hampshire. That's one. But others would like to persuade customers to buy more, or employees to join their company, or donors to your new innovative approach to donating $10 every month and getting that nice golden porcupine pin.
It's a nice lapel pin.
And so this is an approach not about manipulation. This is not about control. In fact, the very first study I did with this to make sure this thing works before I talked about it at PorcFest or promoted it to customers was around ethics. And Cialdini's approach to ethics is kind of the libertarian version of, we don't want to defraud people. So is what they're saying true? Is it natural? It's not contrived. It's not exaggerated. And is it wise? Is the other person going to feel burned if you make this persuasive appeal? And it turns out there's a bunch of psychology around when people knowingly deceive us, they change the way they talk and they don't even realize it. So for example, they back off of the first person pronouns and use third person. So they kind of psychologically distance themselves from their deception of you. So I'm able to measure this with extreme precision. And so at PorcFest, I've tried to think of many ways that people in the Free State Project might wish to persuade and influence. And I created prompts, which are how you can tell the new kinds of AI like ChatGPT what to do for you. And I created it in such a way where if you're running for office here in New Hampshire, you could tweak it and get a better campaign speech, or create a website, or any kind of use case as a politician, or just somebody who's influencing legislation. You're testifying in Concord. What would you say if you have a short period of time that's honest, but it would raise to the surface these things that are natural to the situation without contriving it, without manipulating, but just so people can see the recommendation in its proper perspective. So the idea with the AI is to painlessly use these things. Persuasion is just the first of many for me. I have many others that they're using it for. But you can see where for the Free State Project, it's a no-brainer that would be useful. I've given it to one person who's into AI in a at New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. They're not fully using it yet, and there's some tweaks I'm doing to my AI, but there's many use cases. You can see how powerful this can be. If we've got 98 freedom-loving Republicans in our state legislature, and I've armed them all with this pro-liberty persuasive AI, how much better are we as a chorus like that, powered by trustworthy AI, than we would be by ourselves, or just an occasional chatting with each other and helping each other that way. So this, my hope would be this turbocharges our freedom and accelerates our freedom in a totally responsible way, if that makes sense.
So what would I find differently if I were experimenting with your AI versus, I know right now as we're developing like social media content and nice little like posts and stuff, I sometimes I feel like it's cheating a little bit, or at least it would have been if I was still in school. I'll go to Grok on Twitter and say, hey, Grok, can you kind of develop a list of interesting question posts that we could ask from the Free State Project? And I'm always surprised, you get like maybe 20 generated, and some of them are better than others, but then there'll be like 5. It's like, wow, those are actually really profound questions. I bet if we post that, it's going to it's on brand, on mission for what we're trying to communicate, and it'll also really generate some conversation and some feedback from people that will be valuable for us. So that's with Grok. Would I find with an AI that's more specifically tuned for persuasiveness, like you're attempting to do? Would I find it much different, or what would I experience there?
Grok and Llama and ChatGPT, they all have some sense of Cialdini's work, but they often make certain kinds of mistakes that this AI that I promote doesn't. But in the examples you gave, it turns out that charisma is it's teachable and coachable, and actually it predicts elections. In fact, a friend of mine he predicted Trump winning this time because he's slightly more charismatic than Kamala Harris.
Only slightly?
Well, slight on his scale, because Trump's not as charismatic as like the "I Have a Dream" speech, right?
Okay,
I mean, he's relatively more charismatic, but not on an absolute basis. He's not super inspiring to all people, not like Ron Paul would be, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, he's the gold standard for me.
Correct. So you can see where, and in fact, in persuasion, charisma is one of those things politicians, leaders give their followers, right? We're inspired by people like Ron Paul. And he talks about the moral purpose of liberty, but he says it in a compelling way with great stories and nonverbal behaviors and 3-part lists. These are the things in the science of charisma, are things that are gifts that in Cialdini's model trigger reciprocity. We feel obligations to give other people back when they've given to us. So we feel like we want to defend Ron Paul if people diss him because he's done such good things for liberty. So this AI, whether it's persuasion or charisma, can measure it and evaluate whether those questions that Grok gave you were sufficiently charismatic, sufficiently persuasive, or if not, or it might propose other things. Mine has quality controls that Grok and these others don't, because I use a psychometric, a measurement technique to make sure it's explainable, it's grounded. I force it to behave itself according to the science, and then I measure how good it is before I recommend it to people.
Okay. How would one, I assume at this point in time, in order to experiment with your AI, you've got to physically go to Matt Barney or digitally ask Matt Barney on an individual level. It's not
or
like
Dan Burfoot, the other Porcupine, my CTO is, frankly, he's better than me at this point to go talk to about it because he's got the code.
Okay. What are so obviously I could see kind of the value for we've got a lot of politicians and aspiring politicians, and we are always trying to make, you could call it make the sale, I suppose. It's persuade people to take that next step to you don't need to be just a lurker who's kind of curious about the Free State Project but has never taken a next step. We want you to take that next step and join a discussion group and ask people questions and kind of get engaged. Or we want you to take that next step to really kind of plan a visit, or take that next step to declare your intent. So would an AI like this be really potentially helpful for us developing strategies for persuasion?
Definitely.
To help people take that next step, each step along the way?
That's right. In fact, that principle is what Cialdini calls the principle of commitment. The more we make public, active, voluntary commitments, even baby steps, we're more likely to do even more, and we're more likely to remain aligned with those. So it can suggest them. In fact, when I first piloted this, my youngest son had a girlfriend. Now, my kids didn't have a choice because they heard their geeky dad talk about persuasion constantly for their entire lives. So they really know the principles of persuasion pretty well. And he'd been using them ethically, of course, with his sweetheart. But I basically had my AI suggest what else he might do to honestly deepen his relationship with her. And I measured my son against a lawyer named Jerry Spence, who's never lost even one case since the 1950s. He's taken very tough cases. So my son was not only beating Jerry Spence, but the AI recommended 3 more things. I showed it to my son and his girlfriend, and they'd done 2 of them, but they liked the third. So basically taking the best and making them even better. So even if you're, I'm sorry?
What was the third?
Well, they had met and became attracted to each other in their, actually, ironically, New Hampshire originated robotics team. So if for those of you that don't know, in Manchester, there's a terrific serial entrepreneur. The company is DECA, who started, I'm blanking on his name right this moment, but the company DECA, he started First Robotics. It's worldwide now. And then my son and his girlfriend met there at this robotics team. And so it said, you should have a robotics themed date. And so they said they thought that was a cool idea. They hadn't thought of that one.
Oh, well, I hope it went well for them if they followed the AI's advice.
It did. They stayed together for a year.
All right. Well, I could definitely see how something like this would be very valuable, especially as we're like retooling our welcome pipeline right now. So I might ask you outside of this interview if I could play around with that sometime. It sounds very valuable. Let's see what else. So what other I guess we could keep talking about AI, or I could circle back to your experiences since you've come here.
Well, maybe I'll just plant one more AI seed for you, because there's another angle I'm equally excited about that many free staters, especially during COVID, suggested that a lot of the woke stuff be up on from the government schools, be streaming it on YouTube or at least some public venue, or the police. There's been a bunch of cop block type stuff. You could see where this AI doesn't have to measure persuasion, can measure other things like how woke it is or how effective the teaching is. You can see where the politicians who are maybe promising some things but voting in a different way, or well before their vote, all the transcripts, insofar as those transcripts are available, these are things that the AI can measure. So it's sort of like the anti-NSA, the freedom twist on NSA. You can measure not just their ethics, but how pro-economic and personal freedom are they well before NHLA even gets a hold of their score. Or in the case of the teachers, if you're not homeschooling, or you're not, even if you're private schooling, to what degree is that curriculum effective? How pro-freedom is it? So there's many other use cases for this same explainable, trustworthy AI that goes beyond persuasion that I hope to talk about if it gets accepted at Liberty Forum later next year.
Well, we'll look forward to that. It is nice to note that the way these AI can be used by the people to hold the powerful accountable, because of course when you talk about politicians becoming even more persuasive with the power of AI, of course, most politicians aren't liberty politicians, and a lot of politicians are very persuasive to very destructive ends. So,
so to that point, I measured most of the Republicans, all the Republican debates. I measured all of them with this persuasion AI. None of them were very good. They're all pretty bad. But guess the one relatively pro-liberty guy, Vivek, slightly beat the rest of them in his persuasion, but he still left a lot on the table. So, and this is typical. I measured all the presidential inaugural addresses with this persuasion. None of the politicians are consistently excellent with this stuff. So that's an opportunity for us. If these are professionals, national, international level people. If they're not great, if we can get the AI in our liberty community, we got a chance to massively improve their odds.
So when you measure the persuasiveness of a debate with the AI, is it just off the transcripts, or
Correct.
is it okay?
Yep.
All right. So you know, it's having gone through so many political debates myself, and then you watch it afterwards, and you try to get feedback from friends, and everything is very kind of subjective. It's not like when you do the rewind on like a basketball game. It's like, okay, here's where the play went right, the play went wrong. You know, to have something that maybe can help you kind of dissect and analyze from with very objective tools. That would be fascinating. I might run through some of my old debates with Senator Angus King through that through that system to get some insights there.
Sure. I've got some of these on YouTube, or I mean on LinkedIn. If people want to go to my LinkedIn channel, I did some videos of these, including political ones I took many slices of Tucker Carlson's interview with Putin, and I measured Putin, and that was fascinating because he wasn't. Putin was damn good at pointing out when U.S. foreign policy was hypocritical, but he really blew it with scarcity and all the, you know, he's in a friggin' war, and he didn't, you know, there's lots people are losing that he didn't highlight. So even Putin wasn't great at it. I've done it with a bunch of business people like OpenAI when the board tanked the CEO and then brought him back. So there's a bunch. If people want to see more versions of this, I've got it up on my LinkedIn profile.
What do you think as far as what does AI represent in a big picture as this kind of brave new world that we're entering? Is it should we be afraid, or should we be optimistic about where things may be going with AI playing, you know, more bigger role in society and our lives?
Both. I mean, there's good reason to be fearful of it and being used to hijack us, and it does hallucinate and it's biased, but in the right hands, it can be incredibly powerful for us in moving more freedom in New Hampshire, or better customers for our business, or it's coming, and it can do certain kinds of human tasks, things that only humans could do really well. But one of my next books with my co-founders is about how it's actually leaves more work, real human work, right? We're not going to elect the machines. We don't feel obligations to the machine in hospice. Nobody wants to hold the hand of a robot as they're dying, right? There's still plenty. It frankly frees us up to do more of the things only humans can do. And so what does that mean for us in promoting freedom? I think it's a tremendous opportunity as long as it's quality controlled, as long as we can trust it. And that's kind of my angle on it.
Yeah. So that's interesting. You know, in the division of labor, just like all kind of divisions of labor, it's the opportunity for us to, I guess, for human beings to focus more on the interpersonal human right. Aspects of life. Okay. Well, what are you looking forward to now that you have finally made the move and you're finally here in New Hampshire? What are you looking forward to from the Free State movement in the next 10 years?
I'm very excited about deepening my relationships with the nice people I've already met and started good relationships with. It just seems endless, no matter what region. I just went to the Pemi Valley Porcupine meetup, and you know, it's like you instantly have friends because you already have something in common with these people. So that's fantastic. I mean, I hope to found more organizations, not just my current AI one, that get at more freedom here. And I certainly want to help others, you know, thrive and make a living here and expand. I'm optimistic. I think it's hard to be optimistic about any other place on planet Earth other than here, because no matter what happens in international politics or local, things are just obviously going to continue to get better, just like have been for the last 20 years. So how much more further we can go, I don't know. I'm super excited about the work I'm doing and the cool people I get to do it with, but equally excited that honestly, the locals have just been fantastic here. I literally have a neighbor who's not a Free Stater. He said he was embarrassed to admit that he's a Fed. He works for the federal prison, but he's quoting Austrian economics. And we go shooting together. Like, you just can't make this up. So like, what other non-Free Staters that are pro-freedom that moved here for freedom and don't really even know about the Free State Project? Well, I stumble upon. That'll be fun too.
Yeah, they just heard that New Hampshire was the freest state in America, or they had to escape Maine or
Right.
Vermont or Massachusetts. And I know, it's funny. I know so many people who have made the move, who, because of the reputation of the state that the Free State Project has helped to build up, that aren't even totally aware that they're in some ways participating in this grand experiment in
Right.
freedom. So plenty more ahead. Well, I want to give you the final word, Matt. Anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to cover? Any words of wisdom you want to share with our audience? Any thing of your work that folks can check out that we haven't already covered?
I'll just say to those of you that love freedom and maybe you haven't made the move yet to New Hampshire, it's not too late. And you can be a porcupine like me, and you'll regret not coming sooner. But boy, it's been refreshing and revitalizing for me, and so I'm extremely excited about that. And frankly, I never expected things like my professional side of my work to get even better, because I met a friggin' PhD in computer science who wants to work with me. If I hadn't moved here, I wouldn't have met with him or worked with him. And so you can't say enough nice things about making the move sooner rather than later. So, don't miss out on what we're enjoying here.
And I know that there are many people who've made the pledge over the years, who some have made the move, some have not yet. But even if you made the pledge, 20 years ago, it's life goes in stages and phases, and the Free State is still open and welcome. So, Matt, thank you for joining us on the show. Thank you for joining us in the Free State. Thank you for being a fellow traveler in the movement for the last 20 years. And I look forward to all that you do now that you're here and you're planting your roots in New Hampshire officially.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Thank you, Matt. All right, everyone, that's the show. I really appreciate Matt Barney coming on. By the way, as I mentioned, of course, you can find his book, Growing Liberty. You can get this on Amazon.com like I did. And he did mention the proceeds of the book go to support the Free State Project. So that's worth doing. But you can also get a signed copy of this book, signed by the author, Matt Barney. You can get one if you go to fsp.org/give and you sign up for our Porcupine Patrons program. I think it's the second tier. We've got this in tiers. All right. We've got like our granite tier for $10 a month. We've got our copper tier for $25, silver for $50, gold for $100 a month. We've got platinum for $250 a month. We've got what's next? Diamond for $500 a month. We've got, and the highest level is the Bitcoin level for $1,000 a month or $10,000 a year. We named it the Bitcoin level because we actually have a donor who said, I will give you $10,000 for the Free State Project to qualify for these matching funds if you name it the Bitcoin level. So we named it the Bitcoin level. But whether your contribution is big and very generous, like some, or it's a smaller donation, $10 a month, $100 a year, it is greatly appreciated. And you'll get some nice swag from a Porcupine lapel pin to some signed books, complimentary tickets to Free State Project events. We are over 2/3 of the way to our end of year fundraising goal, and we'd love to have you chip in and to help us reach that, and also just to let me know that you are bought into the mission of the Free State Project and what we're working to do every single day as we promote the Free State Project to those who are unaware and curious, as we outreach to those who are interested and want to learn more, as we welcome those who are making the move, and as we engage with those who are here on the ground looking to pay it forward from all those who help them make the transition to New Hampshire themselves. You can help those efforts at fsp.org/give. And of course, I will mention too, tickets are on sale now for PorcFest and Liberty Forum for next year. You can find those at their respective sites. And next week, you may notice Christmas falls on Wednesday, and I do promise to bring you a new episode every single Wednesday. So we are planning a special Christmas episode of the Porcupine Report. We're going to be recording it in advance. I hope you can understand that. we all want to be with our families on Christmas, but we'll pre-record an episode. We're going to be doing kind of a roundtable Christmas special with a couple past guests of this show. Usually this show is just kind of one-on-one conversations. We're going to have a bigger roundtable. It'll be a lot of fun. So look for that next week on the Porcupine Report. And in the meanwhile, thank you for supporting our efforts to build a free society in New Hampshire. Merry Christmas to you. And furthermore, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be destroyed.